Hello, my name's Linda, and I'm here today to tell you my story. This story is a story of love, and it's about what happened to me in the year 2013 over a period of 3 years until 2016. It's like an allegory, if you will, of the Song of Solomon, where I was asked to play the part of the Shulamite and the Lord Jesus was my bridegroom. It was a story that was bittersweet. It was a very difficult journey, and yet it was the loveliest of journeys as well, because it took me deep into the heart of the Lord. And as you hear it, my prayer is that you too will be encouraged to take your own individual journey into the heart of God, a place where you will discover unconditional love and acceptance. So I bless you as you listen to my story and pray that you will be encouraged. I've split it into 3 parts, because it's quite a long story, and you can listen to it all at once or you can listen to it in parts. But I pray that whatever format you listen to it in, you'll be blessed. Thank you for listening. So I was conceived before my parents married and brought up in a typical working class Catholic family, the eldest of 3 and the only girl. The fact that I was a girl didn't bode well for me, as my father had wished for a boy. And throughout my whole life, until encountering my heavenly daddy, I never knew the delight and the satisfaction nor security of a father's love. Hence my perception of both men and a father were completely warped, and the pain of rejection was buried very deep into my heart. At the age of 11, I went to grammar school, and initially I felt very proud at having gained a place, and I worked hard, mixing with the nice girls. Unfortunately, however, at about the age of 13, missing a bus one night changed the course of my life to my detriment. Before I go on to explain what happened that night, I have to tell you that when I left that grammar school, in the eyes of the majority of staff, I was a complete write-off and a no-hoper. Despite having passed the 11 plus, due to my rebellious behaviour and lack of interest in archaic teaching methods, I left school with hardly any qualifications. I felt totally lacking in self-esteem and self-worth and considered myself a failure, even though I hid these feelings behind a veneer of vociferous self-confidence. To go back to the story about missing the bus, I had arranged to meet some friends and we were going to a youth club, but the bus arrived late and my friends had left without me. I felt afraid and abandoned on that bus station, but then I saw a group of girls from my year at school who were known to be quite wild. They called me over and invited me to go out with them, and I said yes, when I should have thanked them but declined their offer. I don't have any desire to exalt the work of the enemy, so suffice it to say that this wrong choice helped contribute to a season of dissipation and unhappiness, which was to cast a shadow over my life for the next 20 years until I met with Jesus. I experienced a total breakdown in the relationship with my father, and my parents got divorced when I was 14. I then went on to live through 2 broken marriages and the agony of divorce. The second divorce was so traumatic that it left me with depression and anxiety and eczema, and I was in a real mess. And to make matters worse, we had 2 young children. This was my complete and utter breaking point. But shortly after this divorce was finalised, I came to faith, and it was also at this time that God brought me the husband of his choosing, with whom I have a third child called Thomas. During the time of separation from God, he was still very gracious to me, and there were periods of great joy. I had a tremendous mum who stood by me and loved me through all my mistakes, even though she herself wasn't a believer at this stage. All my life, I had had such a desire to travel and see the world, and at the age of barely 17, I caught a bus to Barcelona and never returned home from then on, apart from for brief visits. And I travelled from Spain to Portugal and then on to Germany, and I studied hard to learn the languages of these nations. Whilst living in Germany, I got a job as an air stewardess and fulfilled the dream of my childhood, which, as I mentioned earlier, had always been to travel. Despite these positives, the baggage of the past was still being towed around with me, and I also had several unsuccessful relationships, which I walked out of as easily as I had walked into. Now, as a Christian, I realised that the ability to commit to anyone stemmed from the fact that I was afraid of rejection, that I didn't have the knowledge of the love of a true father in my life, as well as other things, of course. But I also seemed to be totally oblivious to the hurt and damage I was causing to others. After being an air stewardess in Germany, I married for the first time and moved back to London, where I got a job in the fashion business. And our circle of friends at that time were mainly graduates, and this highlighted my feelings of inadequacy greatly, as I had left school with only a couple of GCEs. The marriage only lasted a couple of years, and to cut a long story short, a few years down the line, I was married to someone else and living up north near my mum with 2 children under the age of 2, and yet another disastrous relationship on my hands. Now, my second husband was a highly intelligent lawyer who, as far as I was concerned, represented all that I longed for. I was in awe of him, and now see that I actually idolised him somewhat. He had the qualifications and the public standing that I longed for, but he too was hurting and wounded. And despite the gift of 2 adorable children, whom God has blessed me with enormously, our marriage was a complete failure, but neither of us had the ability to fix it. My husband didn't have much faith in my academic prowess, and this caused me no end of distress. It compounded my feelings of inadequacy. And so when a German examiner extended the opportunity to do a degree at university, I jumped at the chance, even though I had 2 children still in nappies and by now was involved in a very traumatic divorce. This degree was to be a huge learning curve for me, a lesson that God was going to teach me, even though I was still a couple of years away from knowing him. I came through with a first-class honours degree and even won the Student of the Year award. I'd never won anything apart from maybe a school raffle and a beauty contest at my dad's work party at the age of 9. Believe it or not, the first person I thanked upon reading my result was God, and then my mum. And in those few euphoric moments, I actually thought I had arrived. But within a few days, the excitement of the achievements had faded. And as I reflect on those days, I have realised that God's idea of success is totally contrary to the world's view of it. Then in 1993, a Jehovah's Witness came to my front door and told me that I was on my way to hell. I gave her all the familiar arguments about being a good person and not harming anyone. And after her visit, I was warned about continuing the contact with her. Although she was a lovely lady, she was just deceived. However, God used this lady to get me into a local Anglican church, because having heard about my potential final destiny, I felt the need to search for some answers. I walked into the church, sat at the back and was just thrilled by what I heard. I felt like my heart was filled with light and joy, and I then attended a course on finding out about Jesus, and in 1994 was confirmed into the church, and I meant it with all my heart. I came into the kingdom a completely wounded and unsuitable candidate for anything of any substance. There was shame, rejection and condemnation on me, and I had no idea what true love entailed. I certainly did not feel worthy to be loved. But our God is a redeemer, a healer, a restorer, a lifter of heads, and a great encourager for whom nothing is impossible. He chooses the weakest and the most unlikely vessels to show forth his glory, of which I am one. And that is exactly what he did with me. And for a period of 3 years, my life became a prophetic declaration of his covenantal love for all his people. Please note I say all his people, not just some favoured few. He loves all of us the same. It was a bittersweet journey of total separation unto the Lord, a journey of discovery into his heart and nature as the God of love. And for this to happen, my husband left and my 3 children were scattered around the globe. I had to be alone so that the song of all songs could be played out in my life, with me taking the role as the Shulamite and Jesus, my bridegroom and husband. As you continue to hear my story, you will see that no matter how far we go away from him or how low we stumble into sin, the one who is love can't help but stretch out his nail-pierced hands in total, unconditional love and acceptance towards us no matter what. So it all began in spring 2011. I had woken up and was thanking God for my home and my family and my husband. I remember feeling safe and secure because my husband was doing well at work, but in truth, our marriage was not as God wanted it to be. There were many issues my husband and I did not have the courage to talk about, and so they were just swept under the carpet, so to speak. A friend was coming for lunch, and I was preparing our food in the kitchen. Suddenly, the presence of God filled the room. It was a thick, awesome presence, and I heard him speak within my innermost being. It was so clear. Will you put your marriage on the altar for me, Linda? My first reaction was one of fear and panic as questions assaulted my mind. What will I do? Where will I go? How will it affect the children? How will I live? And what will people think? I went through all these thought processes and questions, but only God's request hung in the air. I then saw a picture of myself standing alone with a suitcase in each hand. This was a divine sign that I was to go on a journey and I was to go solo. After several minutes had elapsed, I told God that I had to grant him this request because there was no alternative for me. To refuse him would mean a stagnation of my walk, and I couldn't bear that. Nevertheless, I was extremely perplexed by this whole encounter and very fearful. When my friend arrived, a very mature Christian, I told her what had happened, and she gave me some very wise advice. She said, "If this is God, he will remove Michael from you. But you must say nothing. Let God do it." 2 years later, yes, it took 2 years, Michael and I had both been prepared to some degree for what God was going to do in our lives. And it was at this time that our marriage was on the rocks after 19 years of being together. I'm going to stop here and we'll resume part 2 for those of you that want to continue.